Hi everyone, so welcome to another tutorial video on one of the Spring Boot's features. So in last video we discussed about starter dependencies in Spring Boot, and in this video we are going to be discussing another interesting feature in Spring Boot, that is the auto configuration. So we know that in Spring Boot we do not have to do all those manual configurations that we had to do in Spring. So let's have a look on how the Spring Boot takes care of all these. Okay, so first let's understand what is the need of auto configuration. Why do we need this auto configuration in Spring Boot? So what used to happen before Spring Boot, we had our Spring based applications, and in those Spring based applications, everything had to be configured manually. Like if you're talking about the dispatcher servlet, if you're talking about MVC applications, so in that case we have to configure the view resolver, we have to take care of the component scanning, and other features also the developer, the user had to take care of, like the serialization, the deserialization, etc. So with Spring Boot's auto configuration feature, all of this configuration is automated. So we just have to use the annotation and Spring Boot takes care of everything. So we have seen the need for auto configuration in our Spring Boot applications. Now let's take a look at how does Spring Boot do this auto configuration in our applications. So Spring Boot auto configuration feature, it attempts to automatically configure our Spring application based on the jar dependencies that we have added. So based on the dependencies that are available on the class path, Spring Boot configures those frameworks without the need of configuring them explicitly or manually. So this is the auto configuration feature of Spring Boot. Now let's take an example. So suppose I want to use an in-memory database, which is the H2 database feature available in Spring Boot. So what will I do? I'll just have to add the H2 dependency in my Spring Boot application's pom.xml file. And based on that dependency, Spring Boot framework will automatically configure an in-memory H2 database for my application. Yeah, it's that easy. Interesting, right? So that's why I love this feature the most about Spring Boot, the auto configuration feature. So let's see what we have learned till now. So what is auto configuration of Spring Boot? The auto configuration can be defined as the property of checking for the dependencies, or we can say that the presence of certain classes that are in the class path, the existence of a bean, or activation of any property. So let's try and break this definition. So suppose if I have a component class in my application, if I have a class that is annotated with @component class, then the Spring Boot auto configuration property will register that class as a component in the class path. That's it. I just use the @component annotation and Spring Boot automatically identifies and marks that class as a component class. Similarly, we can do that for @bean annotation. If I have a class that will be handling configurations in my application, I can mark that class as @configuration using the @configuration annotation, and Spring Boot will take care of the rest of the things. So how does Spring Boot do this auto configuration? So if you look into the slide, the whole magic of auto configuration, it is done through the annotation @enable auto configuration. And this annotation is wrapped under the annotation @Spring Boot application. So we define the Spring Boot application main class with @Spring Boot application, and the enable auto configuration annotation is combined under the main Spring Boot application annotation. So using this, the Spring Boot takes care of the auto configuration in our applications. Let's take a quick look at the Spring Boot application annotation, which is the main entry point of our Spring Boot applications. And then we will have a look on the practical aspect of this lecture. So the Spring Boot application, it is a combination of three annotations. First, we have already discussed the enable auto configuration annotation. Second is the component scan, and the third is the Spring Boot configuration annotation. The enable auto configuration annotation, it takes care of doing the auto configuration feature of Spring Boot. The component scan and the Spring Boot configuration annotations we will talk in another video that is not a part of this tutorial. We will discuss it in upcoming videos. So we use @Spring Boot application annotation in the main class of our application, and the Spring Boot framework, it does the rest automatically. It will do the auto configuration for us. It will take care of doing the component scanning for us and also configuring our Spring Boot applications. Okay, so we are done with the theory. Now let's dive into our IntelliJ, into our IDEs, and have a look on the practical aspect of this Spring Boot application annotation. So I have a Eclipse IDE open in front of me. I have a demo application main class. This is the main class, and we can see that this class has the annotation @Spring Boot application, which we discussed just now. Let's do a control click and see what this annotation means. So we have done a control click on our Spring Boot application annotation, and we can see that it is a combination of the enable auto configuration annotation. It also wraps up the component scan annotation. And also if I scroll down, we can see that the configuration annotation is also wrapped up. So coming back, this is the main entry point of our Spring Boot applications. This application combines three other annotations: the enable auto configuration, the component scan, and the Spring Boot configuration annotation. Okay, so we are done with this tutorial where we discussed the auto configuration feature of Spring Boot. We saw how to do the auto configuration feature, how to just simply implement the auto configuration feature of Spring Boot, how we can do that using the @Spring Boot application annotation. We see what are the annotations that are wrapped under this @Spring Boot application annotation. So with this, we come to an end of this tutorial. So I hope that you guys had a clear understanding on how does Spring Boot takes care of this auto configuration. What is the annotation that is required for the auto configuration? What is @Spring Boot application annotation, and how does Spring Boot takes care of auto configuration? What are the annotations wrapped under the @Spring Boot application annotation? This is also an important aspect from your interview process. So this question gets asked a lot in the interviews. Okay, so with that, we are done with this tutorial. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. We are going to be uploading daily tutorials on Snowflake, AWS, and the whole Java Spring Boot microservices ecosystem. So make sure you hit the subscribe button and leave a like on this video. And see you next time, guys. That was it. Thank you.